In the previous class, we looked at critical reading in detail. Today, we will look at one last important aspect related to reading in academic context, that is reading and making notes. So, making notes is an important aspect of reading process. Why? If you make notes, it helps you understand difficult ideas, and it also helps you to remember them and retrieve them fast later on for examination purposes or for the purposes of assignments and so on. So, therefore, if you read and make notes, that has been proved to be more effective than just passive reading. So, in this class, we will look at how we make notes and what are the steps involved in this process. First, note making actually depends on a few things like goals of your reading. So, what are you reading? So, recall here we have discussed several goals of reading, or you can say different kinds of reading, like reading for specific information, reading for general information and so on. Then what each assignment requires you to do, the task you have. So, what are you expected to do? Are you expected to review several studies and write a paper, or are you expected to present your argument on a specific issue? So, it depends on the nature of the task you have. Then how you learn best. So, there are different methods of note making, we are going to see them very soon. So, it depends on what you feel most comfortable with. So, accordingly you will choose the technique. So, basically there are three main steps in note making. So, what are these? First one, identifying and writing down the main points. Second is paraphrasing, and third, organizing the points. First one, that is identifying and writing down the main points. So, main points help you understand the content, the writer's perspective, attitude and the purpose. So, in order to identify main points, we read the given text very carefully. We also look for signposts while reading. For example, some of the linkers. If you come across a linker like most importantly, so then you know that this is the point the author wants to focus more on. You find a linker like nevertheless, so then you understand that the writer is going to present a contrasting view or opinion on the topic. Then change of paragraphs, headings, subheadings, all these are signposts you read very carefully in order to identify the main points. Then ask yourself questions about the rationale behind the title, paragraphing and discourse structure. Some of these aspects we have discussed when we were looking at critical reading. So, these things help you clearly understand the tone, the attitude of the author and other things. Think about the purpose of the text. So, you have a text. So, why this text has been written? Usually a text can have the purpose of just informing or amusing or entertaining or persuading. For example, you come across an article from an encyclopedia. So, the primary purpose is to inform. If you come across an advertisement, there the primary purpose is to persuade you. Similarly, an argumentative essay primarily aims to persuade the readers. If you come across say a joke or a humorous story anecdote, the primary purpose there is to amuse or entertain. So, while making notes, you as a reader, you need to be aware of the purpose of the text. Then finding the main ideas. So, how do we find them? Where do we find them? One strategy which we can use is looking at what we call a topic sentence. A topic sentence usually is that sentence which has the central idea of a paragraph. We are going to look at this in detail when we look at the structure of a basic paragraph. Anyway, I am going to explain what a topic sentence means very briefly now. So, each paragraph ideally is built around a single idea. So, that single idea is encapsulated in the topic sentence. The rest of the paragraph has subsidiary information or supporting details elaborating on the topic sentence. So, if you find the topic sentence, which is usually at the beginning of a paragraph, we are going to look at some examples. So, you can find the main idea of that particular paragraph. Then distinguish between main and subsidiary information. So, as I mentioned, in a paragraph, the topic sentence contains the main idea and it is explained or it is illustrated in the rest of the paragraph. So, the supporting details, subsidiary information like anecdotes, examples, these things, you need to separate them from the main idea. Sometimes you just need to focus on the main idea and you do not need to worry about these. So, when you are making notes, you underline or you find the main idea and you write only that thing down. Next, understand the structure of the text. So, identify the meaning relationships between words and ideas. What kind of relationships are we talking about here? So, it could be cause effect, it could be generalization, contrast and so on. So, accordingly we will read the text and make notes. We express these relationships in a different way. So, now let us look at an example. Here are 3 paragraphs and then we will attempt to locate the topic sentence and thereby we will try to identify the main idea. So, let us look at the first paragraph. I will read it out. The goal of all process analysis writing is the same, to teach the reader about a process. Cookbooks, car repair books, computer manuals, sewing books, business books, these are examples of process analysis writing. Directions for washing your new jeans, directions for putting together furniture or a book about how to succeed in business are process analysis too. In other words, process analysis examines a series of actions that bring about a particular result. So, you can see that this particular paragraph is about process writing. It explains what a process writing is. So, if you look at this paragraph and go to the very beginning, say the goal of all process analysis writing is the same, to teach the reader about a process. So, this is the topic sentence and this contains the main idea of this paragraph. Because this paragraph explains what a process writing is, so if you have to put it in as few words as possible, you just go to the first sentence and you can find the details here. Okay. Now, we look at the second example. I mentioned earlier that usually topic sentence appears at the very beginning of a paragraph, but that is not the case always. Sometimes topic sentence might appear at the end as well. So, let us look at this example. Jean-Pierre Blanchard, a year old, has the drawn face of an old man and a cry that is little more than a whimper. His ribs show through his skin. He weighs just 11 pounds. His mother, Maria Blanchard, tries to feed him what she could find, combing through the trash scraps of chicken or potato. She finally took him to a hospital in Caracas, where she prays a rice milk concoction keeps her son alive. I watched him sleep and sleep, getting weaker all the time, losing weight, said Miss Blanchard, 34 years old. I never thought I'd see Venezuela like this. Her country was once Latin America's richest, producing food for export. Venezuela now can't grow enough to feed its own people in an economy hobbled by the nationalization of private farms and price and currency control. So, here you can see that the structure is different. So, what is this paragraph about? This talks about conditions of economy and food production in Venezuela. But the paragraph begins with an anecdote, and using that the paragraph illustrates the problem of food shortage in Venezuela. So, the paragraph first begins with this anecdote, and then when you come towards the end, so here you find the topic sentence. Venezuela now can't grow enough to feed its own people in an economy hobbled by the nationalization of private farms and price and currency controls. So, you can rephrase that as Venezuela, which was once food surplus, is now suffering from severe food shortage because of some economic policies and decisions. To put it in a very simplistic way, this is the main idea of this paragraph. Now, sometimes the topic sentence may not be there directly. In other words, the main idea may not have been succinctly put in a single sentence. As a reader, you might have to read the entire paragraph and then infer from it the main idea. So, let us look at the third example. We are all familiar with the many forms of the directional approach. We see it in cookbooks, instruction manuals, handbooks, rule books and textbooks of various sorts. The directional approach may be used for any subject that calls for how to do it guidance. Writing an essay, achieving success in business, coping with gadgets, managing personal finances, or putting an end to procrastination. In each case, we examine the situation carefully, clarify our purpose, and identify our audience. We also need to consider the kind and amount of information required to complete the process, being careful not to overestimate what our audience knows about the subject. We would then move on to establish as simple a sequence as possible for the process. The sequence could be chronological by time or by importance. So, this is on process writing, and here this particular paragraph explains what the directional approach is, but the main idea is, you can say, a sort of spread, and the topic sentence you have to infer. So, after reading it, you can say that this is the main idea of this particular paragraph. When readers have to be taught how to do a process, the directional approach is followed, where steps are explained in a sequential order or according to their relative significance. So, in this case, as we saw, topic sentence is not there explicitly, you have to infer from it. So, this is the first step in making notes. You read something, you identify the key points, and you remove the subsidiary or the unnecessary information at this stage. Okay. Moving on, the next step is called paraphrasing. So, what is it? So, when you paraphrase, we rewrite the information in our own words. Most important thing is, we do not change the meaning. So, you might ask, okay, I have read something, I just simply underline it. What is the need for paraphrasing? If you paraphrase, that we will see the following lectures, that it will help you in summarizing a text, and this is most useful, say, when you are doing review of previous studies. Also, note here that when you are using that information in your writing, if you paraphrase, that is always an effective way. Otherwise, you need to quote the words as they are with all the necessary citation information. Okay. Now, how do we paraphrase something? We find first alternative words and synonyms for the words, phrases which have occurred in the text, but we do not change specialized vocabulary and some very common words. So, for example, you find the word theory of relativity. So, it is a technical term, so we do not change it. Similarly, you find a word something like change. So, that is a very common word, and so we do not paraphrase it. Then, we also change the grammar of the text. We rearrange words and sentences, and some examples of what the kind of changes you can do include changing nouns to verbs, adjectives to adverbs, and so on. You break up long sentences into short ones, or you combine short sentences into long one, you convert simple into complex, and so on. So, by employing these strategies, we can paraphrase. For example, here is an original text, and then it has been paraphrased, and the main points have been noted down here. So, let us look at these two things to understand how paraphrase works. So, I am reading the original extract. Children spend a very large proportion of their daily lives in school. They go there to learn, not only in a narrow academic sense, but in the widest possible interpretation of the word, about themselves, about being a person within a group of others, about the community in which they live, and about the world around them. Schools provide the setting in which such learning takes place. So, this is from a book written by Leiden in 1985. So, we note this information, and then the main points are here, like for example, so children spend a large proportion of their daily lives in school, and as a result they learn many things in school. So, learning not just in academic sense like school subjects, the topics which come in textbooks for example, they also learn about themselves, about being a person within a group of others, about the world around them, and so this is what the paragraph is about. So, having gleaned out the main information, here is a paraphrased version. So, Leiden 1985, schools, this is where children spend a lot of their time. So, see, spend a very large proportion of their daily lives, it has been paraphrased in this way. Then they go there to learn. So, children learn not only in a narrow academic sense, that has been paraphrased as here, not just school subjects. Then about themselves, about being a person within a group of others, and so on. This has been paraphrased in this way. Also understanding self, immediate groups, the community, and ultimately the world. Then schools provide the setting in which such learning takes place. This has been paraphrased like this: schools creates opportunities to learn about many such things. Here we need to note the difference between paraphrase and a summary. Anyway, we are going to discuss it in detail in the forthcoming lectures. Here I just want to draw your attention to this point that when we paraphrase, we usually do not reduce the original content, but when we are summarizing, we do it. So, since this is a kind of paraphrased version, most points have been retained here. Okay. Once you have crossed step 2, the next step is organizing these main points. So, you have understood main points, say, of each paragraph. If you are reading a longish text, then you need to connect different parts of the text to make sense of it as a whole. So, this is where organizing the points becomes very important. So, once we list main points, the next task is to organize them. So, you can rewrite the main ideas in complete sentences, you can combine your notes into a piece of continuous writing, you use appropriate conjunctions, linkers, and of course, you have to check your work at the end. There are different formats to organize these notes. We are going to look at them one by one. The first one is called outlining method. So, what happens here? You arrange your notes in a sort of outline fashion. The information which is most general begins at the left with each more specific group of facts indented with spaces to the right. The relationships between the different parts is carried out through indenting. So, for example, you have a main point, you start it at your regular indent position. Say you have one sub category under that. So, you increase indent by one space. So, then say you have further something, so you further increase your indent. So, levels of importance will be indicated distance away from the major point. Indentation can be as simple as or as complex as labeling the indentations with the Roman numerals or decimals. So, when you have the points, you can just bullet them, or you can use Roman numerals or any other numbering system. So, what are the advantages of this method? So, it is a well organized system if you do it right. It records content as well as relationships, because you have one main point, then sub point under it, further sub point. So, if you look at a sub point, you understand that this is related to this main point number 1. So, the relationships are also very clear here. It also reduces editing and is easy to review by turning main points into questions. However, it requires more thought in class for accurate organization. Say you are listening to something, then making notes, trying to make notes, then it might be a bit difficult. This system may not show relationships by sequence when needed. Say you are looking at chronology of something, a series of events, then that relationship is not accurately shown here. Now, let us look at an example. This is a document which appears on MHRD website. This is about languages in India. So, this has many sections. I am going to focus only on one part of that longish text, that is about language families in India. So, if you go to this link, you can access the article. Now, I am going to show you notes made on the basis of this text. Okay. So, language families in India, this is what the content is about. Then I have labeled this as 0, this is introduction. It talks about movement of races, so many ethnic groups, mixing of people, and therefore, there are many language families in India, and this article identifies 4 major language families. So, that information is mentioned here, and then the subsequent sections take up each of these 4 families mentioned. So, point number 1 is Indo-Aryan. The key points under this is the largest language family in India. Its immediate predecessor is language called Indo-Iranian. This you can find, for example, in religious texts such as Zend-Avesta. Some examples, some languages which belong to this family are Hindi, Bangla, Punjabi, Gujarati, Marathi, Kashmiri, Oriya, and so on. So, this is one, and then there are sub points under this. Then the second, Dravidian. So, what are the sub points under this? About 26 languages are there in this family, out of which 25 are in India and only 1 in Pakistan, that is Brahui. This may be a key information, so you note it down without missing it. Then within this language family, there are 3 subgroups: Southern, Central, and Northern. So, you might be interested in some languages which belong to these subfamilies. So, some examples are also listed here. So, Southern, Kannada, Tamil, Malayalam, etc. Central, Telugu, Gondi, Kui, etc. Northern, Brahui, Malto, Kuduk, etc. So, moving on. Third language family is Austric. The text talks about two main branches within this family, Austroasiatic and Austronesian. Austroasiatic is what is discussed in the text. There are three subgroups within that: Munda, Mon Khmer and Vietnamese. Out of these three subgroups, only Munda subgroup is found in India. So, some languages which belong to this group are Santali, Mundri, Korku and so on. The text mentions that speakers of this language family are found mainly in jungles and hills. Then the fourth one, Tibeto-Burman. This is part of Sino-Tibetan family, and Lepcha, Sikkimese, Garo, Bodo, Manipuri, Naga, these are some languages which belong to it. So, you can see that here we mention 4 major language families, and so 4 are numbered here. And then the text also talks about some isolated languages. Why are they classified separately? That information is important. They are classified separately because they can't be fit into any language family very easily. Some examples include Burushaski, northwestern part of India, then Andamanese and languages found in Nicobar Islands. So, this is how you will use outlining method to make notes and organize. So, now say you are interested only in say Tibeto-Burman language family. So, you can focus only on that particular section. So, it is easy to retrieve and easy to remember. The next method is called mapping method. So, it is a method that uses comprehension skills and evolves in a note taking form, which relates each fact or idea to every other fact or idea. This is something similar to outline method, but the difference is this is a graphic representation of the content. This format helps you to visually track your text regardless of conditions. Then here you can very clearly see the relationships. You can also edit your notes by adding numbers, marks and color code them. This is also very useful say when you are making presentation. Some examples are shown here. So, you can use it to generate ideas in what we call brainstorming. So, you have a topic and then you discuss and then you generate ideas around it. Then you can also structure and classify ideas very easily. So, as you can see in the diagrams, these points are built around a single central idea, which is usually placed in the center. Then categories and subcategories radiate from this main idea as branches or sub branches. For example, you can see here the main idea, then branching out, then further sub branching. These can be further divided into or subdivided as more and more information is added. If you are using say computer, you can also use different colors, shapes to show different groups. So, as I mentioned, this kind of method helps you to quickly identify and understand the structure of an idea. Say for example, in the previous case we looked at, I am coming back to this slide. So, Dravidian language family is a big one, and then within that there are 3 subgroups, southern, central and northern. Then within that there are again some examples. So, if you have this kind of branching and sub branching of ideas, it helps you to use a kind of map like this, so that you can understand the relationships across these ideas, among these ideas. It helps you to understand how these pieces of information fit together. It also shows you the relative importance of different pieces of information, because the one which is more important is closer to the main idea, and you might also use color coding or a particular kind of a shape. So, to distinguish between what you think is more important from less important things. Okay. Moving on, the next method is called charting method. If the text is chronological in structure, then this method is very useful. So, what we do here is we draw a table, and then using rows and columns you make notes. So, this helps you say to track something chronologically. What you need to do is you need to determine the categories to be covered in the text. Then you set up your paper in advance by columns headed by these categories. So, as you read the text, you record information into each of those appropriate categories. It provides an easy review mechanism for both memorization of facts and study of comparisons and relationships. So, how? We will look at an example now. So, you have read say about World War I and World War II. You want to see if several things were similar between these 2 wars, or if there were any differences. So, as I mentioned, this kind of method helps you in comparisons. So, you have thought of categories, the label headings. So, here first one is how it began, then who fought against whom. So, the World War I, Archduke Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary killed by a Serb, Austria declared war on Serbia. That is how World War I began. How World War II began? In 1937, Japan attacked China. In 1939, Germany invaded Poland, and that is how it began. Then who were the parties involved? So, Allies and Central Powers in World War I, Axis powers and allies in World War II. World War I included under allies Britain, France, Russia, Italy and the US, and Central Powers included Germany, Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria. World War II Axis powers included Germany, Italy and Japan. Allies included Britain, France, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, India, Soviet Union, China and the US. So, this kind of charting method helps you in comparing information, and also say you are reading something about development of something and you want to track it chronologically. So, what happened in 1920, say how the modern aircraft was built. So, you want to record different stages. So, first who did it, what happened, and then what was the next major development and so on. So, in that kind of setting, in that kind of text, this charting method is very useful. We move on. the last method is called sentence method. Basically, what we do here is we write every thought, fact, topic on a separate line, numbering as you progress. So, this is very useful, say when you are listening to a lecture and then you are making notes. This is slightly more organized than the paragraph. However, this is not as organized as say your outline method or the chart method, because here you cannot determine major minor points from the numbered sequence. It is difficult to edit without having to rewrite, difficult to review unless you know the clear relationships among the points. So, let us look at an example. This is a text called "Why Women Live Longer." So, let us first read it. Despite the overall increase in life expectancy in Britain over the past century, women still live significantly longer than men. In fact, 1900 men could expect to live to 49 and in 1900 men could expect to live to 49 and women to 52, a difference of 3 years, while now the figures are 74 and 79, which shows that the gap has increased to 5 years. Various reasons have been suggested for this situation, such as the possibility that men may die earlier because they take more risks. But a team of British scientists have recently found a likely answer in the immune system, which protects the body from diseases. The thymus is the organ which produces the T cells which actually combat illnesses. Although both sexes suffer from deterioration of thymus as they age, women appear to have more T cells in their bodies than men of the same age. It is this, the scientists believe, that gives women better protection from potentially fatal diseases such as influenza and pneumonia. So, if you use sentence method and you take down notes, this will be something like this. So, British women live longer than men. You have used information in very abbreviated form. So, women 79 and men 74. Reasons: new research suggests immune system and in particular thymus and then again T cells. So, what exactly is the reason? Women have more T cells than men. So, it means better protection. So, therefore, live longer. So, in this way you reduce the information and glean out only what you think is very important for your purposes. So, these are some methods you can use to make notes. Moving on, we will now attempt some exercises. So, here are some texts, and in this particular text we will decide on the order of importance of 3 key points. So, this text talks about something. So, we have to read it carefully and then see what is most important here and what other details you can decide not to focus on. This is called hot rubbish. The majority of people in the small Derbyshire village of Poolsbrook have joined a scheme to make power from rubbish. Methane gas will be collected from the local rubbish tip and will be used to heat houses more cheaply and generate electricity. The villagers who have been affected by the closure of the local coal mines suffer from unemployment. So, cheap heating is especially important for them. They have raised £2 million cost from development agencies. The new system, which will be the first of its kind in Europe, will lead to a healthier environment by cutting CO2 emissions and should also create 3 full-time jobs. So, there are 3 different, you can say, sets of ideas here. So, the first one introduces the topic, the second one actually gives details about the process and some details about the money part of it, and the last one talks about its significance. So, note here, this is what is going to happen in future, will lead, then it will create some jobs. So, out of these three sets, which one you think is most important? The first one, because it introduces the topic and it answers the basic questions what, when, where. So, what people are going to make power from rubbish. So, where it is a place called Derbyshire village in Poolsbrook, and it is a scheme which has been launched recently. So, these are the most important details. So, if you then want to find out how they are going to produce power from rubbish, then you need it, and why this thought came. So, that information is given here, and then its significance, the future implications are there in part C. So, this is how we read the text and find the most important part, and you make notes about it. Okay. It is another text, it is called the sixth wave. So, now let us read it and underline key points, so that it helps us to understand the text. Later on, these key points will lead you to summary of the passage. Okay, let us look at the text. The sixth wave, note there is a question mark. Lord May, the President of the Royal Society, has claimed that the world is facing a wave of extinction similar to the 5 mass extinctions of past ages. He calculates that the current rate of extinction is between 100 and 1000 times faster than the historical average. The cause of previous extinctions, such as the one which killed the dinosaurs, is uncertain, but was probably an external event such as collision with a comet. So, before we move on, let us look at what is important in this particular paragraph. So, the sixth wave, there is a question mark, it means it is a probability, it is a possibility, or it is an opinion of somebody. Okay. So, who is proposing this? The person is Lord May. Who is he? The President of the Royal Society. So, that is important. And what is the claim here? World is facing sixth mass extinction. So, that is the point. On what basis? Now, the current rate of extinction is between 100 and 1000 times faster than the historical average. Then the details are here about previous extinctions. It mentions one where dinosaurs vanished. The cause is not known, it might be a collision with a comet. However, the present situation is caused by human consumption of plants, which has resulted in a steady increase in agriculture and a consequent reduction in habitat for animals. Although many people are still hungry, food production has increased by 100% since 1965. So, note here, the previous paragraph mentions one of the reasons for one of the previous extinctions was an external event. So, the sixth one, what could be the reason? This, according to the claim, this is a man-made, this is going to be caused by human consumption of plants. Some data is here. food production has increased by 100% since 1965. So, when the food production increases, this leads to reduction in habitat for animals. Moving on, Lord May also pointed out that it was very difficult to make accurate estimates as nobody knew how many species of animals lived on the planet. So far 1.5 million species had been named, but the true figure might be as high as 100 million. Our ignorance of this made it almost impossible to work out the actual rate of extinction. However, the use of intelligent guesses suggests that losses over the past century were comparable with the extinctions of earlier periods, evidence of which is found in the fossil record. So, this takes the topic further, and Lord May here points out that we actually do not know how many species of animals are there. So, hence even if some species goes extinct, then all we won't know. So, it is difficult to according to Lord May, it is almost impossible to work out the actual rate of extinction, but the losses are comparable with the extinctions of previous periods. So, this is the point here. So, now if you look at the text as a whole, so you can list couple of points. So, you can say the sixth extinction is happening or is a very probable phenomena, and next is why, because human food production has increased, and once the agriculture expands, it leads to loss of habitat and therefore leads to extinction of species. So, then do we have any solid data? We actually do not have. There are two issues. One, the actual number of species is still not known, and then we have also been very ignorant of this thing. And as a result, so we do not actually know the exact rate of extinction. So, this is what you can say are the main points from this particular text. So, this is how we read the text and then we get the main points out of that. So, summing up, we have completed one important aspect of this course, that is reading in academic context. If you recall, we first started with analyzing the given problem, understanding the requirements, and then identifying sources of information. So, that was the first aspect. The second was reading the sources very carefully. So, we saw that we usually read with multiple purposes. We can read something for just general understanding, it is called skimming. So, the purpose here is not to get into details, you just want an overall understanding, you just want to have the gist of the text, or you have multiple texts, you just want to kind of taste each of them and then decide which one you are going to focus on in detail. So, this is what we saw under skimming. Next is we read for specific information. Sometimes we are looking for some specific pieces of information. We are interested in a researcher's work, a particular famous personality, a particular theory, and so on. So, we use the strategies of scanning and skimming. So, we locate the keywords, we use contextual clues, we use headings, subheadings, and contents page, these kind of things, and then locate keywords. When we locate, we read only that bit to get what we actually need. And then we looked at reading for detailed understanding. Here we saw that we look at the text in detail, starting from its title to the very last line. We look at the patterns of organization, we analyze the patterns, how paragraphing is made, what are the links across paragraphs, are there examples, how are these examples related to the main point, what are the arguments, are there sufficient evidence, pieces of evidence. So, these are the questions we asked. Then we also looked at what these patterns actually mean. So, first is the patterns of organization, what are they, and then what these patterns mean to us. Then we looked at critical reading. So, one level is you understand the given text, you read it to learn something. The next level is you critique it, you read it to assess it. Say for example, you are judging its contribution to the field, whether the findings are original, have the conventions been followed there, and then if the argument is strong enough, is it convincing, are there any loopholes. So, we saw some of those examples when we looked at critical reading. Then the last bit which we just looked at was note making. So, when you read, it helps to internalize the ideas if you make notes rather than just passively reading it. So, there are many methods to make notes. You can use outlining, chart method, sentence method, or you can use mapping method. So, these all methods you can use depending on your purpose and the kind of text you are reading. Then we also saw that we use a strategy called paraphrasing. So, we try to put what the text says in our own words, but without changing the meaning. So, here we retain the technical words or some general words, but the rest we try to rewrite. We observed that this kind of paraphrasing helps you later on when you are summarizing a text. We also noted that when you are simply paraphrasing, you do not intend to reduce the length, but when you are summarizing, you do it. So, we will look at summarizing in the forthcoming lectures. So, then the third step is organizing the points. So, you organize the points in a careful fashion, so that you can use it for later purposes. Thank you.